MEDIHEAL Hospital Eldoret versus KRA. In February 2025, KRA decided to do a compliance review for MEDIHEAL Hospital for the years between 2019 to 2022. Upon the review, KRA decided to disallow 40% of the expenses that had been claimed by MEDIHEAL Hospital. So this resulted to a payable income tax of around 10 million shillings. So let me tell you what happened. KRA decided to take all the expenses of MEDIHEAL Hospital. And then from all the expenses wakachukua 60% they purported hiyo ndio expenses. And then the 40% was totally disallowed. Hii inamaanisha KRA said that MEDIHEAL Hospital made a profit of a whopping 40% of their total revenues, which of course in reality did not make sense. So MEDIHEAL Hospital decided to lodge an objection. But at the end of the objection decision just confirmed the assessment. MEDIHEAL Hospital bado waka insist these expenses were because of the business. So why would KRA disallow our expenses and they were used in the course of business? So not because MEDIHEAL Hospital was aggrieved, waka decide kwenda TAT. In the TAT, there was only one section in the Income Tax Act that was of question. Section 15(1) of the Income Tax Act, which states that for an expense to be allowed, it has to be wholly and exclusively for business purposes. However, KRA saidia waka insist na Section 54 of the Income Tax Act, which requires businesses to keep its records for a minimum of 5 years. On one hand, Section 15A inapatia businesses authority ya ku deduct expenses za biashara. But on the other hand, Section 54 inapatiana the guidelines, the foundations on which unakuwa required to keep your books for 5 years. Just hold on, I'll tell you where these two sections come together. So hii inamaanisha you do not just claim business expenses. You actually have to substantiate those expenses for them to be allowed. So Section 30 of the Tax Appeal Tribunals Act and Section 56 of the TPA Act basically inasema the burden of proof iko on the taxpayer to prove that the tax decisions ziko wrong. So this complicates the matter further for MEDIHEAL Hospital. So as you can see, inakaa kama KRA's defense was very airtight. Kuna records, kuna burden of proof, which according to KRA, MEDIHEAL Hospital walishindwa kudischarge. Despite all this, MEDIHEAL won the case. Surprised? Let me tell you how. KRA in its defense had said that MEDIHEAL failed to provide all the documentation required to actually prove that the expenses were actually incurred. Only bank statements were provided by MEDIHEAL Hospital. MEDIHEAL wakapatiwa a leave na upon request wakakubaliwa walete evidence yao of those expenses, which is allowed in the Tax Appeal Tribunal. So this time round, MEDIHEAL did not hawkulalia maskio. They went and collected all the documentation from the receipts to the proof of payments to how the money actually moved, and every document that was required for the expenses wakaileta kwa TAT. So TAT ikaangalia this documentation, and according to actually Article 47A, which talks about fair administrative justice, wakaona the expenses actually made sense and itakuwa unfair kama KRA to disallow 40% of those expenses na zinaka legit. In its ruling, ilikuwa 27th of July, the Tax Appeal Tribunal set aside KRA's decision. However, it did not squash the assessment. Chenye ilifanya, ilirudisha the case back to KRA. KRA was told waangalie that documentation vizuri, waangalie the evidence that has been provided, and then they give the assessment. So this was a partial victory for MEDIHEAL Hospital. Number one, the assessment did not stand. So basically TAT ili squash your assessment yalipatiwa. Then number 2, KRA walikuwa obliged kurudi kuangalia evidence before patiane assessment yao. So pia inamaanisha TAT haiku overrule assessment ya KRA. Waliambiwa tu they go back and they look at the evidence afresh before they give out a judgment. Hii ni my take home from this case. Number 1, a proper documentation, and if possible, watch it with digital. Number 2, the burden of proof iko kwa taxpayer. So kama hauwezi prove the expense actually incurred, you're going to lose that case. Number 3, we have learned that from section 51 hadi section 53 ya TPA inakupatia reprieve, whereby if kama una feel aggrieved na decision ya KRA, you can go and actually have your case listened to with a fresh set of eyes. KRA kupatia assessment sio mwisho ya hiyo kesi, na ukawa na malalamishi umepatiwa avenues za kusikizwa na mtu tofauti akuja asikize kesi yako, and you can actually win that case against KRA. See you on the next tax case.